Welcome back to the shop, everyone. Today's video takes place in week 52 of 2022. It is the final week of the year. That's December 26th to January 1st, and we are going to start this video off by putting the front end back on the car. So with one clamp on the middle here, and then I think I end up putting one down low on the fender. This side will be in well enough. So I was grabbing the nose cone and I'm just kind of loosely putting it in place, and then I realized the fender moved a bunch, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to probably put the other fender on first, and the reason being the nose cone actually spreads the fenders out. So if I'm putting just one side on, it's really hard to do. It's actually easier to put the nose cone on when both of the fenders are on, and the reason why, as I say, it spreads the nose cone spreads the fenders out, and then the fenders kind of come back in to hold it together. So I'll just quickly throw this side on. I'll get it clamped on. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put the front crash bar on the car. That also helps when you're putting the nose cone on. Yeah, as you just saw, I had the driver's side in, and I went to do the passenger side, and the driver's side jumped out. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab a couple of small clamps, and I'm just going to clamp this down as soon as I get one side done. Yeah, what I was doing there is I was just kind of showing you how I'm going to run those bars. Obviously, we saw in the previous video that with the procharger, I can't use that Team Z front tube bar because it just gets in the way. I can't put the pulley on. It sucks, but I'm going to have to modify it. But the reason why I put the front end on is I want to see how the intercooler is going to fit inside the nose cone. I just want to get a little bit of an idea and see how much space I have or don't have as it is. And without the radiator and without the air conditioning condenser, I can't really get a great idea as to how much space there may or may not be. But I'm just kind of mocking stuff up. I just kind of want to see. So as I mentioned, I need to modify those front tubes. So what I'm doing is I am just grabbing some quick measurements just to start figuring out how I'm going to build this and how I'm going to do it. I'm going to grab an angle finder because obviously I need to extend the top bar out a fair amount, and then if I kept it at the same angle it would interfere with the nose cone. So I'm going to need to have a more drastic bend in that front tube, and that's what I'm trying to figure out right now. So off camera, I did a little bit of CAD design and I printed this new tube out just to kind of get a rough idea as to if that is the angle that I want. I think I set that up at like 50 degrees, and all in all, it seems like it's gonna do just fine. So now that I've been looking at this and playing with this for a bunch, I'm going to go off camera and do some more testing, update the angle, and make it so that the bottom piece is a bit longer so that I can kind of get a cleaner idea as to where it's going to land. You know, from this design, it looks like my procharger pulley is going to clear just fine, so I'm kind of happy with this. But I'm going to go off camera and do yet another design, and we're going to do another test fit. I ran out of green vinyl, so I have updated to red. I just made it so that the piece is longer, goes all the way to the bar, and you know, this is a fair representation of what I need. If you follow my Instagram, just this week I posted pictures of my new tubes installed. So, you know, if you've seen any of my Instagram posts this week, you would actually know that this is more or less how I install the bar. So I'm just taking some final measurements just to figure out how long I need to make this tube. When I initially thought of what I was going to do, I was going to just kind of cut it and sleeve it and extend it, but I hated that idea. Like 5 seconds after I thought of it, I'm going to cut that tube off entirely and replace it with a brand new tube. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put the intercooler away since I don't need it, and I'm also going to, I think I'm going to pull the front end back apart and put it away. So as I'm putting stuff away, I'm pretty sure the GoPro dies and I didn't notice it because here we are, front end's on and front end's off. But it is what it is. So what I'm going to do is I am going to start figuring out some of the procharger brackets. That was the tensioner I just had in my hand. I'm just trying to get, you know, the idea of where some of this stuff goes. So part of what I'm doing is figuring out if I can actually use the hardware that came with the Mazira water pump to install the tensioner. And the reason why this is important is procharger designed this pulley in such a way to work with the stock hardware that came on the car. Well, those Mazira socket head cap screws are not the stock hardware, and so the stock hardware, it threads into the timing cover, and then there's another exposed thread on the front of it. So one of the fasteners for the procharger threads onto the stock fastener, which in my case no longer exists. So I can't even do anything with this right now until I figure something out for those bolts. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move over to the classic auto air plate that I had cut out. I already know that I'm going to need to drill out the holes just to make sure that they are open enough to go onto the studs that are in the car. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the hardware necessary to mount the unit onto that plate. I lied. I'm gonna find the hardware needed a little bit later. Just moving some of the wiring out of the way and just test fitting to make sure that this goes in as I hope that it does. And look at that, it fits. So the holes that I had water jetted out when I designed this and cut it all out, my measurements were accurate, which is I'm pretty surprised, but it worked. So looking at this, you can see those studs stick out a fair amount off of the backing plate. So I know I can cut them down quite a bit because I want that plate as close to the firewall as possible, and I don't want them poking into the classic auto air heater box. I know from before when I had it mocked up on my test plate that it did in fact kind of hit the back of the heater box, and I don't want that. So what I'm doing is I'm putting some washers on there, and then I'm putting a nut on there. And the reason why I'm doing this is, as I mentioned, those studs are way too long, so I want to cut them down. I don't want to cut them down too short, so by putting the washer and the nut on there, I know how much I can cut them down. And before I cut them down, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that die on there. So after I cut it down, I can just kind of pull the die off and, you know, clean up the threads a lot. Yeah, so I just took my Sharpie, marked on the stud where I want to cut it down, pull everything out and off, and then I will cut it down. Since getting that plate on, the holes were really tight, so I'm just going to open them up so that it makes it a little bit nicer to get them on. So drill them out and then just debur the holes. Since I'm going to be taking the grinder in the car, I'm using this cardboard just to cover up some of the wires that are going to be in real close vicinity and real susceptible to getting sparks all over them. The last thing I want to do is melt any of these wires, so I'm just using this cardboard as a bit of protection. And as I mentioned before, I'm putting that die on the stud before I cut it. That way after I cut it, I can just pull that die off and it'll clean the threads up for me. After getting all that cut out, we can just test fit the plate back on there, make sure everything's happy, which it is. I'm content with that. I got 0 complaints. So now what I can do is mount the heater box to the plate, and that's using 1/4 inch hardware. I measured the holes that I'd previously drilled out on the box, and then in my water or in my design that I sent off to the water jet, I had the holes cut out, and I gotta say again, I'm pretty impressed with my work. Everything lined up mint. Like, I didn't have to modify anything. I was very surprised. I expected I was gonna have to tweak some of the holes, modify them a bit, but I surprisingly didn't. I impressed myself with that one. So what I realized at this point is I installed the heater box the wrong way on this plate. I believe I installed it upside down, so I need to take it all back apart, flip it around, redo all the connections, put it back in the car the right way this time. Yeah, I don't know, I just had a brain fart and put it on the wrong way, but luckily it was a minor thing, super quick to fix, so. So that right there is the main control box for this unit, and so I'm just doing a small little test fit just to, you know, kind of see where I'm going to put it. And now that I have that installed the correct way, I can grab the whole plate with the unit and get the first install on the car and see how this looks. And it looks pretty good, but whatever asshole engineered this goddamn thing made it so that it's almost impossible to get the fucking nuts on this thing. Man, that guy's an idiot. He should be fired. Never allowed to engineer another car again. So I might have to go in and move those, because yeah, it's not easy to get one of those nuts on. You got to get it just at the tip of your fingers, and you know, I'm trying to think of how I'm going to do that if I have to install any of the ducting beforehand. But luckily the car's not painted yet, so if I have to, you know, cut any of those mounts out and move them, I can easily do so. And yeah, you can see how much time I'm spending here trying to get this nut on. I drop it a bunch of times. It's not good. I really will likely design it or modify it and get a new plate cut out. Finally got those on, and this is actually looking pretty good. I'm not at all unhappy with how this is fitting in there, with how the plate fits, with how the heater box sits. Everything is pretty good. So what I got here is I got a package from Temco. So these are the 6 gauge lugs. I mentioned before, or in one of the previous videos, that I bought a new Temco crimper, and the 4 gauge lugs that I bought just didn't work. So I'd reached out to them and we worked it out. And so I got some new 6 gauge lugs, and I'm just going to quickly test them just to make sure they work. Spoiler alert, they work just fine. I was super happy with how this turned out, and will be using these on the build. Yeah, so I was super happy, and so I decided to email the guy right away and let him know. Yeah, everything worked out just fine. Just tested it; it's great, and thank him for working with me and making sure that we got this sorted out. So Paul over at Temco, if you for some reason are watching this, like to thank you very much for all your help. And now that we've tested it and we're happy with it, we can put these new lugs in the container. But of course, these are 6 gauge, so I need to move all of the 4 gauge down a bit. So I can put the 6 gauge in, because I think I have this organized smallest to, or like the smaller gauges to the bigger gauges. I think, maybe. Yeah, so initially I moved them all down the wrong way, and then I realized my fuck up, and I am just moving them down to the other end of the container, because the 6 gauges are going to go in before the 4 gauges. And next, this is not car related in the least, but it is kind of, because I need this stuff to work on the car. So one of the things is I didn't have any 7/16 inch fasteners. When I got my bolt bin, I messed up and I didn't realize I didn't order anything 7/16. So when I was trying to do some of the engine plate stuff, I realized I don't have anything 7/16. So I reached out to my fastener supplier and I got a whole bunch of stuff. I got some stainless steel riv nuts. I've got some stainless steel fasteners to use with the riv nuts. Nuts, bolts. I had to restock some 3/8 stuff. So for the next part of the video, I'm just going to go through organizing my bolt bin. It's kind of part of building a car, but not really. I was on the fence about keeping it in, but I kept it in. So if you don't like this sort of thing, because it's not directly car related, let me know, and I won't include it in the future. As I say, I'm on the fence, but it's in this one. that stuff organized finally, and on to the next day. So this is the air conditioning condenser that I got from Classic Auto Air. Just checking it out, making sure, you know, that it's not damaged, anything like that. And this is a fairly large one, so you know, we don't get super hot summers here, but I want my air conditioning to blow cold. If I turn it on and I set it to cold, I want it to be cold. So just taking a quick peek and making sure it's going to fit between the rails like I expect. And since I don't have the radiator, I can't really do much more at this point, because I kind of need the radiator in there first, and then the condenser will sit behind it, and then the intercooler will sit behind that, or I guess in front. So checked it out, made sure there's no damage, happy with it, throw it off to the side, and I'm going to start doing some cleaning up. Shop's in a bit of a mess, so let's get a little organized. Alright, now that we've spent a whole ton of time cleaning up, we are going to get back into some of the classic auto air stuff. So that right there in my hand is the main classic auto air connector. It has, as you can see, some yellow, what's that called? Braided sleeving? Wire loom, that's what I'm looking for. It's got some yellow wire loom, it's got some black wire loom, just different colors, and it's not gonna go with my overall motif in the car. So what I'm doing is I'm pulling certain parts out of this harness and clipping it, and I'm just trying to figure out now, I'm trying to figure out the best place to mount the brains of the operation in the car. And can't really see what I'm doing here because I'm in the way, but yeah, I'm just trying to make sure that if I put the box here that I can still plug into the main heater box, and you know, just try and make sure that's where I want it, and I believe it is. So that right there, what I have in my hand is the module for my gauges. So I connect that module onto the Dominator, give it some power, and then plug it into the first gauge, and then that drives all the gauges. And I want that mounted sort of up in that area as well. So I'm just trying to see if I can mount both the, you know, brains for the heater box as well as that little module for the gauges in there. And I think it'll work just fine if I do put it there. I may also put that module for the gauges under the dash. So I've got options, and I'm just trying to make sure it's going to work as I expect it's going to, or hope it's going to. So that right there is the heater ground wire. So that is going to be a input onto the Dominator to turn the air conditioning compressor on. So as you've seen me do a whole ton, just getting some of these wires organized. Some of the wires need to go up to the dash, some of them need to go over to the passenger side firewall, and I'm just kind of getting all of that sorted still. You'd think I'd have it sorted by now with the amount of work I've done on the wiring in this car, but here we are. I don't have it done yet, so I'll just keep working at it piece by piece. Yeah, so those right there are most of the coil wires. So those go out to my ignition coils. So I'm just cutting the loom short. You know, I should have done this a long time ago, but I'm very nervous about cutting these wires because if I fuck it up, then I gotta, you know, pull the whole harness back out of the car, run a new wire. So I've done my best to leave them long, and it's getting to a point where I need to do the wiring. I need to finish it, so cut it short, and it's the next step into getting it done. So I'm done with the front of the car for now. So I've decided I need to do some work. I'm going to terminate the wires on the relay board. Now that I have all of the ring terminals, I got those in. So yeah, I can start actually terminating all of the relay board wires. So that's going to be water pump wires, fuel injectors, coils, the air conditioning compressor. What else do I have? Oh yeah, the water pump, fuel pump is going to be on there, line lock. So yeah, it's going to get those all terminated. Finally realized it's probably not a great angle for you guys just looking at the side there, so give you a bit of a better angle, maybe not the best. I'm really trying now to be very conscientious of where the camera is, because I do really want you to have straight on, see the action, but I also need to couple that with getting work done. So I'm doing my best to be better at it, but it's still not great sometimes, like you just saw, so I'm sorry about that. So just like that, all the wires are terminated on the relay board, and we are just that much further. And so what I'm doing right now is I'm figuring out where some of these wires are going to go. So as you can see, I have two red power studs there. One of those is going to be for battery power all the time. So the relay board is going to be on battery power all the time. And the one that's on the left side of the screen, that is going to be for ignition and crank. So anything that may need ignition power or may need crank power, like the Dominator, will go to there. And that's what that initial use case is for, because the fuse box on the opposite side is going to take care of the rest of the ignition and battery power requirements. But I have those two lugs on the back in case they're ever needed for anything else. What I'm doing here is I'm creating a short little jumper wire, and this is going to go from the battery lug to the relay board. And so there's that nice new Temco crimper with the 6-gauge lugs on the 4-gauge wire, and I'm using the 6 AWG Plus crimper dies. And it works super nice. I can do it one-handed. It leaves a great finish. Yeah, I'm super happy with that crimper. Now that I have the rough size, cut it down, put the second end on it, and once that's done, we will test fit. Yeah, I'm really not happy with how that looks. It's kind of like forced. So since I'm not happy with it, we are going to redo the end. We're just going to cut it down short and yeah, try it a second time, see if we can make this a little bit nicer. So the second attempt is kind of got the opposite problem now. The wire's almost too short, and it kind of, you can kind of see it's like pulling out of the connector. So I think what I will likely end up doing is redoing that in its entirety with a slightly longer piece. Just because, yeah, I'm not overly happy with it. But now that I've organized the wires going to the passenger side a little bit more, I'm going to tape those all up just so that they're the same length. Well, they're already the same length-ish, but tape them up so that they're together. I think what I'm also realizing at this point is I have my turn signal and potentially a headlight wire for the passenger side. I was originally going to put that into the passenger side through panel connector and run that up the frame rail. But I changed my mind. I don't like that. And the reason why I don't like that is I'm already going to have on the driver's side, I'm going to have a headlight wire go through. I'm going to have the left turn signal wire go through. I'm going to have the high beam go through over there, low beam. I think I already said the headlight. So I'm already going to have those wires going over there. And since those already need to go up to the front of the car, I think it'll be nicer to have a single harness on the driver's side go up the frame rail and then, you know, to the lights on the front, and then carry over onto the passenger side. So it's just one harness. I don't have harnesses coming up both sides into the headlight area. I think it'll be a little bit cleaner. So that's what we're doing now. Yeah, I had 47 in the shop with me tonight, so I just got to keep an eye on him because he will get into things he's not supposed to get into. So that purple wire there, that is my starter wire. So that's the wire that when you turn the key, there's going to be a wire coming off of the ignition. Yeah, I guess the ignition switch. And that goes down to the neutral safety switch, or in this case, clutch switch. So you have to have the clutch pressed to the floor and it'll complete the circuit, and then it goes from there out to the starter to fire the starter. What I'm doing here is I am undoing the through panel stud, like the mounting hardware for it, so that I can pull it out. And the reason why I'm pulling it out is because I'm going to put the pins on the end of those wires. At least that's the plan. grabbing out my bench there, and the reason why I'm doing this is I need to sit down and plan out which wires are going to come through that firewall connector in which positions. So what I'm doing is I'm just grabbing out the wiring sheet and I'm going to sit down and start planning that out. And with the start of a plan in place, I can go back to the car and I can start pinning the wires. So this will be a process you've seen me do before. I'm going to strip the wires, I'm going to put the pin in the crimper, and then I'm going to put the wire in the pin, crimp it down, install it into place. What I'm doing here is I'm looking to see if I have a different set of pins on these Deutsch connectors. You can run bigger wires in smaller connectors, and if you have the right pins and stuff like that. So I'm just searching through my stock and my supply, because I do remember I bought the pins that I need. But then I remembered later I actually used them all elsewhere, so I don't have any more. So I had to go and order some more. And I also realized that I can make it work other ways. But yeah, so that's what I'm doing here. I'm just searching for pins that I used already without realizing I used them already. I thought I had them, but I don't. Now that I've got everything pinned, I'm starting to put wires into the connector. And then I realized that I probably don't need them connected right now, so I think I pull them out. Nope, I'm continuing to put those pins in. Yeah, so just getting the last one in, go to reinstall the connector, and it was at this moment he realized he fucked up. That connector mounts from the front side back in, so I need to depin this entire connector in order to push it in from the front and then put all the bolts in, and then I'm gonna need to install all the wires from the back side. Not entirely sure how I feel about that. In some ways it makes sense, and in others it doesn't. You know, the engine bay, it makes sense to have it kind of that way so that you can just disconnect the wiring harness and pull the whole engine out with the wiring harness intact. But on this side, it almost seems like it's going to be harder because I'm going to have to install that connector in the housing, and then from inside the car push each of the wires into the pins. So I'm, you know, on the fence about it. And then I also thought, oh well, you can just you know, undo the nut and pull it out. But that's not gonna work either unless I had like a bigger hole, maybe, because that housing sits into the plate at in a specific way, so I'd have to modify the hole a bit, I think. So I'm a little excited now. Yeah, I just went out to the car and I realized the hole that I have in the car likely isn't big enough. What you're supposed to be able to do is there's a nut on the front side, so you can undo the nut with the plate still installed, and then the entire back connector will come out. Oh man, that's gonna make working on this so much freaking easier. I'm so happy I just found that out. Alright, so now that I've got some of the in-car wiring done, I want to get back to some of the wiring on the engine bay. And so you can see I'm just looking at some of the wiring in the front and whatnot. And before I get to any of that, I'm going to pull that tube front end back off. And the reason why I'm going to do that is it's just in the way. So the two connectors that I'm going to be working on now are the intake air temp and the map sensor. And it's kind of awkward to get at the back of the engine with the tube front end on, so it's only 8 quick bolts, so yeah, let's just pull it off and why mess around. So the first sensor I'm going to wire is the IAT sensor, or the intake air temp sensor, and so that just gets a sensor ground and then a signal wire. This wiring goes super easy, no issues at all with it. I'll tell you, it's so nice having the right tools for the job. So those crimpers there, they weren't expensive, they were super cheap, but man, they are super nice to have. It's a 2-part crimp where you gotta crimp the wire first and then you crimp the insulating seal after, but I don't mind it at all. They work beautifully, love it. So I've got to unlock the IAT sensor connector, and what I'm doing right now, I believe, is looking at the wiring diagram just to figure out which wire goes into which side. Not that I think it matters, but I like having things done correctly, or at least as correctly as I can. So that way, if I were to go back and look at the wiring diagram later and pull this off, I don't go, what fucking idiot wired these wires backwards. Yeah, it's just kind of the way I like to do things. So now I need to wire in the map sensor, and so I've got the map sensor connector in my hand, and I'm trying to get it, snapped onto the map sensor. It's just fighting me. This map sensor has fought me since day one. I've tried, like, even when I was just trying to get it installed on the intake, it fought me. I had to pull the intake off. It's just been very unpleasant working with this map sensor. So what I'm doing there with my phone is I'm setting it to video record, so I can hopefully get a video of what this connector looks like, to see if there is like a fundamental difference between the connector that I got with the kit and the map that I got. And there is. This is a LS2 or LS3 style map sensor on the intake right now, and then that's just like a weather packed tunnel connector, and they're different connectors. I didn't know this at the time. I figured when I talked to Holly and I said, hey, I want to buy this map, I want to buy this, Holly Dominator and Terminator harness kit and all of that, that either A, they would have known that the map sensors are different, or like the map sensor connectors are different, or B, maybe they would have thrown both style connectors into their kits. but they didn't, and here we are. So yeah, I know that was stupidly quick there, but I did show you that the connectors are in fact different. So yet again, I am at a stopping point on that because I obviously don't have the right connector for it. So, since the map sensor is dead in the water, I figure I can start on some of the other wiring. So the other wiring that I have to work on here is fuel pump wiring, and if I recall correctly, I can do the one side of the air conditioning compressor, so I can get the power wire kind of fed up, and I can get a ground wire run over, and so that's what I'm doing there. Is I'm running my ground wire for the air conditioning compressor and the water pump over. I believe I'm using a DTP 4-pin connector for this because I've got water pump and I've got the air conditioning compressor, so both of them fairly large gauge wires. I think I'm running 12 gauge. Look at that, I finally decided to give you guys a better angle of what I'm doing here. So yeah, that's a 2-pin connector I have on there. So I've done half the water pump. I should say I've done half the water pump. I've got the 2-pin connector on the water pump itself. And it looks like I am swapping out for the 4-pin connector because I realized I can use a single 4-pin instead of 2 individual 2-pins, and it'll be a little bit cleaner. So I don't technically need a ground wire for the air conditioning compressor. It kind of case grounds to all the bracketry, but I'm a big fan of running a ground wire anyways. You know, any paint or anything might get in the way, and I'll be able to make sure I have a good direct ground, which never hurts. So that's why I'm running a ground wire for the AC compressor as well. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just trying to figure out the best routing for all of this. Alright, so we're back on the wire, and we got carburetor in the shop today, it looks like. So that what I have in my hand right now is the distributor wiring, and the distributor wiring comes with this massive connector on it. I think it's a 8 or a 10 pin connector, and I really just don't need that connector on there. It's huge, it's ugly. I'm only using 4 pins. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut that short, and I'm just going to put a Deutsch connector on it. So I'm pretty sure what I'm doing right now is I'm looking up the wiring diagram for the distributor connector, because I need to know which wire is the crank wire, which wire is the cam wire. Yeah. Oh, and there's 47 again. So I'm just slicing the wire loom back on it a bit so I can get the wires into the Deutsch connectors and crimped. So what I've made sure is that I have full adjustability out of the distributor. Even though all of my timing is going to be controlled via software, because I've got coil packs, I'm not using the distributor to fire any of the cylinders. You set the cam and the crank sensor by adjusting it, if I recall correctly. I haven't fully looked up the setup instructions, but I'm pretty sure you adjust it, and then when the light goes green, you're set up. And what I'm doing there is I'm grabbing a chunk of heat shrink, and I'm going to put the heat shrink over top of the tube before I actually make any of the connections. That way I can make all the connections, put the connector on, and then run the heat shrink up. So I'm stripping all the wires here, and then I will pin this, and I am installing a DTM 4-pin connector for this one. Yeah, not much else to say. You've seen me strip wires, crimp wires, and kind of put these Deutsch connectors together before, so it's nothing new here. With the heat shrink on there and everything, it looks like that connector came like that from the factory. It is just perfect. Loving it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to cutting the actual cam and the crank wires coming from the Holley short. But first what I need to do is I need to label them. They're labeled right at the very end right now, but what I need to do is I need to label them a little bit further up, so when I cut them I still know which is which. Well, it looks like I don't actually finish terminating the cam and crank wires in this one. I guess that'll be in the next episode. Our next video, I suppose, it's not really a TV show. It's not episodes. But hey, you know, as always, if you stuck around this long, I would like to thank you for viewing, and we'll see you in the next one.